This video will cover problems 4, 5, and 6 for chapter 3 in the final exam review. So these next 3 problems, you are solving a quadratic equation, and you have to decide which method you'd like to use. Some you can use all the time, like the quadratic formula. Sometimes some you can use just some of the time, like using square roots or factoring or graphing. So one thing you got to remember when you're solving quadratic equations is that you need one side of your equation to be equal to 0. So in number 4, that's not the case. So I have to add 2 to both sides to get this right side to be 0. And when I do that, I get x squared minus 10x plus 24 equals 0. And so I'll start by trying to show the factoring method to solve a quadratic equation. So remember, with factoring, I want to identify my A, B, and C values, and we're going to use the X box method. Okay. So remember, with factoring and with this trinomial, I'm going to set up my X, and A times C goes in the top, and B goes in the bottom. So A times C, 1 times 24 is 24, and negative 10 is B. So we're asking ourselves what 2 numbers will multiply to get 24 and add to get negative 10. And those 2 numbers, there's only 2 that will do that, and that's negative 4 and negative 6. Okay. Negative 4 times negative 6 is positive 24, and negative 4 minus 6 is negative 10. Now, with factoring, remember, when A is 1, you do not have to set up the box part of the X box method. And these numbers here I can use directly to rewrite this in factored form. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this purple equation in factored form. So I can rewrite it as x minus 4 times x minus 6 equals 0. And so now remember, to solve this quadratic equation, if these factors multiply to equal 0, that means either x minus 4 has to be equal to 0 or x minus 6 has to be equal to 0. Okay. Remember, we set up 2 mini equations with our factors, and you'd solve this for x. So you get x equals 4 and x equals 6 as your solutions to that equation. Moving on to number 5, I notice this is not set equal to 0, just like the last one was not either. So I'm going to go ahead and move the negative 10x plus 4 over. So I'll add 10x and subtract 4 on each side. Okay. So when I rewrite this, I get, or it'd probably be easier to just add x squared onto both sides. I'm going to do that. I'm going to add x squared onto both sides. And so I'm going to rewrite this as x squared minus 10x plus 4 equals 0. It's nice if you can make this x squared positive, it's nice when it's positive instead of negative. And one thing you might try is you might try to factor. If you tried to factor by setting up your x, you're going to notice, okay, a times c, which is 4, goes in the top, and negative 10 goes in the bottom. If you tried to find 2 numbers that multiply to get 4 and add to get negative 10, you wouldn't be able to do it. You wouldn't be able to find numbers that do that. And so that's a clue to you that factoring isn't going to work here. I can't use square roots because I have an x term. And so I would go ahead and I'd try graphing this equation. So remember, to graph, you're going to go to y equals, and I'm going to type this in. So x squared minus 10x plus 4. And I'm going to graph this. And my window is not looking too good. So I'm going to, I need to see the bottom of this parabola. So I need to zoom out. And remember, to solve this, I'm looking for, where does my parabola cross the x-axis? I'm looking for the zeros. And so I can see that I have two real zeros here. So remember to find those zeros on your calculator. You're going to go to second and then hit that trace button to get to calc. And I'm going to go down to 0. So I need to find this 0 first. So to find the left bound, I'm going to move this cursor to the left side of that 0 and hit enter. Then I'm going to move it to the right side and hit enter. And that x value there is 0.417. Okay, so that's one of my x values. Now I need to find my other solution by finding this 0 over here. I'm going to go to second trace, go to 0, and again, move the cursor so it's on the left side of that 0. And the right bound, I'll put it on the right side and hit enter again. And I get x equals 9.58. And those are my solutions. Okay. All right, last one. This one is set equal to 0. Okay, and so I'll go ahead and try graphing this parabola to see what it looks like I did with number 5. So I'm going to go ahead and put 3x squared minus 8x plus 6. And I'll graph this. I probably will have to change my window. Yeah, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And what you notice is, see how my parabola does not touch the x-axis. I do not see any zeros. That doesn't mean that this equation doesn't have any solutions. What that means is I'm going to have some imaginary solutions. So this is not an equation that I can solve with by graphing. And so what that tells you is our last option that we can use is the quadratic formula. Okay. So you're going to have this formula given to you on the formula sheet. But I'll go ahead and write it out here. So our quadratic formula is x is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we will need to identify a, b, and c here, and I'll plug those in. The opposite of b is positive 8 plus or minus the square root of b, not negative 18, sorry, negative 8 squared minus 4 times 3 times 6 all over 2 times 3. Now, I like to do what's underneath the square root sign first. So I'm going to go ahead and just do negative 8 squared minus 4 times 3 times 6. And this makes sense that I get a negative number under here, right? Because I know when I have a discriminant, a number under the square root that's negative, I'm going to have an imaginary solution. So I'm going to simplify this. Okay. So remember, when we have a negative under a square root, I can treat this like the square root of negative 1 times 8. And remember, the square root of negative 1 is I. So I'll bring this down here. To pull out that negative, I'm going to pull out an I. Right? And so then I have the square root of positive 8 underneath. And I want to see if I can simplify the square root of 8. So 8 breaks up into 2 times 4. And 4 breaks up into 2 times 2. Right? So I want to simplify this. Remember, I want to break out a pair if I see one. So I see a pair of 2's, and that breaks out of my square root symbol. So I'm left with 8 plus or minus 2i times the square root of 2. There's 1 2 left over. Okay. And now I'm just going to look at what I have, and I want to simplify these coefficients, these numbers out front if necessary. So 8 6, that can be simplified, and 2 6 can be simplified. 8, 2, and 6 all have a common factor of 2. I'm running down into this problem. So this is equal to, okay, 2 goes into 8 4 times, 2 goes into 2 once, and 2 goes into 6 3 times. All right, and I'll leave my answer just like that.